Deep in the shadows, I know it's hard to put one foot in front of the other.
Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is CeeChronicles. I post fragrance related content on this platform and would very much appreciate it if you did consider subscribing and joining the family. Now, to those who are already subscribed, thank you so much for coming back. This is going to be a video that's gonna offer you recommendations of Gourmand fragrances that are not like in your face. This video idea actually came from the previous video that I did with Maima, where she, was reacting to some of my fragrances, and in particular it was patisserie that she reacted to, and some of you in the comment section did say that, oh yeah, she loves Gourmand but is not exactly a Gourmand person. So yes, I thought to give you some fragrances with a Gourmand character to them, Gourmand nuance, but these are fragrances that can be worn by both males and females because they are not pushy in that foodie aspect of them. Okay, so the very first one, guys, is going to be the collections, the Antiquities, from the house of Lattafa and the Lattafa Pride collection, and I think this was the second Lattafa Pride or the third Lattafa Pride collection. I'm just going to spray it on my arm there just to remind myself. But the reason why I picked this one, guys, is it does have white chocolate, and white chocolate is obviously the note that is adding a gourmand element in this. So it does come across as a little bit milky there. There is a vanilla tone to this fragrance, but for me to say to somebody who loves, yummy, sticky gourmands, go buy this, they might find it a little bit subtle. So it is definitely one that makes sense to put in this list because yes, it does offer something that's going to remind you of some condensed milk with some vanilla, but with it as well is a greenish tone to it. The greenness of this is not too pushy. It just comes in there to add an aromatic tone to this fragrance. So if you love gourmands, a safe gourmand that's going to be grown to an extent, even a unisex, men can pull this one off. You're not going to be smelling of sweets the whole day, but you are going to have a fragrance, of course, that is, aligning with a little bit of a food aspect to it. Is going to be this one, La Collections, the Antiquities, 1886, guys, from the house of Lattafa is the first one on the lineup. Now, second on the lineup is going to be this one, Caramel Oud by Zaafaran. My atomizer was facing the other direction. I don't wear this one a lot because to me, yes, it does have that caramel nuance to it. It does have praline in this. I think it also has some citruses, or I'm just going by memory here. But what I can extract in this is a praline. And the praline leans more, towards a sugary, sticky, kind of sugary thing there without it being like burnt sugar in your face. So this one, in a nutshell, to give you a mental shortcut of it, is going to interpret as biscuits. If you have bought yourself a packet of those biscuits that sometimes would want you to add something to them, like the Murray biscuits and the chocolate flavor, that's what you kind of get from this. Very, very faint. Okay, it does, yes, have that gourmand element. It does have the caramel, as explained, as the wording of it suggests, but I don't get oud from it. Is also safe enough for both genders to wear. I would have thought that it's going to pull a little bit milky, because of this two-tone aspect of it, or chocolatey to some extent, but that's not exactly what you're going to get from this. You will be wrapped around a sugary accord there, a praline note, as I said, but it's not going to be like slap in your face chocolate or slap in your face yummy, oh my god, you're smelling syrupy, something like that. So this is the second one that I would propose for anyone who's looking for a gourmand that doesn't pull, towards the really, really like sticky gourmands in your face. Al Zaafaran's Caramel Oud. Third on the lineup is from the House of Paris Corner, Qissa, delicious, right? So the name in itself, if you haven't used this fragrance, or you haven't interacted with it, or you haven't got like a sample of it, the name in itself is, I think, is overemphasizing what this fragrance actually interprets as. It lists note of dark chocolate, but I can certainly tell you here that the chocolate that I get in here is not one that I would say is a dark chocolate. It doesn't come across as very cacao-y. It has a chocolate nuance to it, absolutely, but what you're going to get mostly that comes to the surface here is the whipped cream. They did mention that it does have the whipped cream. I think there is also some vanilla in here, if I'm not mistaken, the light citruses and the wood. So it ends up becoming about a whipped cream, but not a whipped cream enough to call it, like a dessert type of cream, if you know what I mean. Say, when you order a creamy dessert and you have that dessert that's going to hit you right there, filling you immediately, that is not what I get in here. I do, however, get that weight of the whipped cream, but the weight of that whipped cream seems to be diluted mostly by those citruses, and it becomes a light whipped cream scent than it is a chocolate scent. So the color of the bottle, yes, does remind me of chocolate, but it's not the chocolate that's going to be in the forefront here. You're just going to be having a creamy wrap up of a fragrance, around you there, quite a softy, to an extent there. The whipped cream, of course, making this feel fluffy, but the DNA being safe enough for both genders as well. So for those who love gourmands but not sticky gourmands, you can purchase this. I find that a lot of people struggle with this, with the identity of this fragrance, because it's quite a tease of everything. I think there are also florals in here, in the end. It's just playing second fiddle there. So third on the lineup, guys, is going to be Qissa, delicious, from the house of Paris Corner. And then we have this one, Al Jawhara, right? This fragrance draws interest every time I speak about it. It's off the Lattafa Niche Emirati. Al Jawhara, guys, sniffing it like this, I'm going to say has macerated or thickened even. From the bottle like this, it comes across as very sweet. I'm just going to spray it to the side. Yeah, it comes across as sweet, just, sniffing it off the nozzle there. But there is something in here that does not make it cross over to that Vaux Patisserie, because I have noticed that there are a lot of comparisons when it comes to this one and the fragrance that Vaux Patisserie is cloning, which is that Italica, right? I had a lot of questions when I spoke about this fragrance, people asking me, is it like Italica? I think, there are aspects in this, like the fruity aspect of it, possibly a tangerine, I don't know, even a caramel, it doesn't list that. And we know that, sometimes Lattafa does not list all the notes. It will have, an element of sweetness. And here, it is definitely the most gourmand of all the Niche Emirati that I have in my collection. Not exhaustive of all of them, because I do not have the other ones, right? But I do have about 14 or 15, which is enough for me to say I do have a significant number of the Niche Emirati. Of the ones that I have, I'm going to say this one does really pull gourmand. It's going to wrap you around a sweetness, a vanilla, a little bit of a caramel tone there, some citruses, even a peach. I think they did mention peach as a note separately there. So you're going to get wafts of like a fruity nuance to it, and it certainly falls under gourmand, but without it being sticky sweet, without it being a fragrance that a man can run away from, or those who do not like sweet fragrances can run away from. It doesn't have a juvenile feel to it. It is a grown style of gourmand. If you like those sweet fragrances with a shy edible nuance in the background, which is what I always call that biscuity nuance, then this is certainly one to try. Al Jawhara from the house of Lattafa. Next up, guys, is Frenetic Delicious from the house of Paris Corner. This is very hard to find. I think Paris Corner also made it a limited release, but you can dig it out, on websites like eBay, right? Drawing its inspiration from Fave Delicious. This is going to be built around that chocolate, caramel, vanilla, some tonka as well, but don't let that fool you. This one has got like a cherry almondy nuance, a boozy nuance to it, so it becomes a very complex fragrance. It's actually going to be in the same vein as the one I'm going to show you after this, where it is gourmand in the sense that you will get wafts of a chocolate from this fragrance. But for me to say, if you love chocolate, go buy this fragrance, you might come back to me and say, what were you thinking? See, because it interprets to a very complex, boozy style of fragrance with a very mature tone to it. And yes, with that almond and caramel reminding you of a foodie feel in it, but without necessarily it being one I would put on top 10 don't miss out on these gourmands type of fragrances. So this is certainly a fragrance I can recommend for those who like their fragrance with an element of food, but without the edible nature of the fragrance being the forefront of the DNA, but having that as the background. I hope I made sense there. So this is Frenetic Delicious from the house of Paris Corner. Next up is Casella Noir. Now this is a fragrance that I extract a gourmandness in, but does not go around popularly as an outright gourmand fragrance. This obviously draws its inspiration from that Chanel Cocon Noir, right? But if you've used that particular DNA, or you've interacted with this one, which is a clone of that DNA, you will know that this is a rich style of a DNA, right? In fact, speaking of this makes me think of, how I should have added that Amarv Club, the Noir Intense Women. I should have, because I get a richness in this that kind of feels that way, where, it is a concentration of a fruity toned fragrance with some florals there. The pitch is quite vivid in here, and it then becomes a very lush style of a fragrance where you can't call this one an outright floral, you can't call it a citrus. It just holds that dense element in it, which is something that will remind you of something that's edible there. So I get that, and I know there is no licorice in this, but there is something around, in this fragrance that kind of interprets as that. If you have, if you like licorice, you will get some element of that in this, like it's got star anise, but of course star anise is not added as a note. So that is the one thing that I extract as an overall DNA to this that made me add it here, that okay, it might not be an outright in your face fragrance that you would class as a gourmand, but if you like those fragrances that are going to be a sweet wrap up, rich wrap up, concentrated feel of a fragrance with a fruitiness there that is coming in its richness and concentration as well, because of how it fuses with other notes, then this is certainly one that you may want to consider, and it's going to wrap you up in a gourmand style of fragrance. For those who wanted to know how it's macerated, I did come and do a first impressions with this fragrance. It is pretty decent, for the price. It is pretty decent. It doesn't change much. It only concentrates a little bit more, but I wouldn't put it on the same par of concentration as that Amarv Club, the Noir Intense Women I was talking about. That one is really concentrated, lasting till the next wash. This one is going to give you a concentrated, presentation of a juice in its macerated form, which is what I believe it sort of like has reached at the moment, but it's not as intense. It's still a fragrance that's going to do 6 hours, maybe 7 pushing it, and by pushing it I mean with you literally maybe doing 15 sprays. Okay, so that is what I can say about Casella Noir from the house of Pendora. And then again from the house of Pandora, guys, is going to be Charuto, and this one is a Regal Reserve. This I have to spray on a piece of paper, but I've been wearing this one actually partly this week. I wore it twice. This fragrance, guys, notes may make you run away from it because it does incorporate that tobacco note. And when a fragrance lists tobacco and some words, most people run away from it because then they don't know what to make of what it's going to become. Now I'm here to say this one is a fragrance which you shouldn't go by the notes when it comes to this. This is better smelt first than going by the notes, especially if you're one of those people that actually does want to, get into the notes first before you make a decision, or that you're purchasing online, because this is going to list the spices and I think birch tar and all that. But what I get is a softie. What I get is a presentation of a vanilla. That's mostly what I get here than anything else. A vanilla that has an underlying creaminess to an extent, even giving me something that I was explaining in this. That's a little bit milky there. So this, to my nose, guys, is a safe fragrance for both genders. It's nothing correlated to its other Charuto, because they did give us a brown one that is, tobacco forward. That one is I think it's a tobacco vanilla clone, the one I'm talking about now, the other Charuto. That one does have tobacco in its distinctness. This one has the listing of tobacco, but that is not what you should be worried about. In fact, you're going to be wrapped around a subtle, sweet, gourmand feel of a fragrance with mostly that vanilla doing the most wafts of a little bit of some florals. They're just a beautifully done fragrance. It's very difficult to describe. So this is one that I'll certainly recommend for those that like grown gourmand style fragrances, without them being sticky sweet there. Charuto Regal Reserve from the house of Pandora, guys, is certainly a recommendation on this lineup. Now we're on to the last fragrance, guys, which is Shaghaf Oud Asrach. This one I've got to warn you that in as much as this one has made it on this lineup as a gourmand, this is a very complex gourmand. I spoke about this one being complex. This has nothing on this. This is very complex. It does have the honey. It does have the dried fruits in there. It does have the vanilla, cinnamon, Middle Eastern spices in there. It does have a little bit of the oud. I like how the oud in here doesn't take center stage, but for those who may not be used, to oud in fragrances, they might smell it the most, but in this, I would say this is a very subtle oud, if you will. What you're going to be wrapped around in when you're wearing this is a honey, the cinnamon style of a fragrance. Some of you are going to detect an apple pie feel in this. Some of you are going to detect dry fruits there, something that feels like dates, something that feels like raisins and stuff. So certainly a fragrance that has that gourmand nature, in it without it being an outright in your face, oh my God, I've got myself a bowl of fruits, if you just open a packet of raisins there and you just put your nose to them, I'm pretty sure you will understand what I'm trying to say by this fragrance, that those are not going to give you like how fresh fruits come across there. You're going to be, you're going to detect that sweet stickiness in just smelling those raisins, and you're going to get that dried feel of the fruits to your nose without necessarily you getting a vivid, say for instance an apricot that has been dried to become a raisin. You're not going to smell it like that in its like distinct apricot feel. So that's what you're going to get from this. You're certainly going to get a wrap up of some dried fruits there, the spices there, the cinnamon there, something that's going to feel like dates, something that's going to remind you of apple pie, and that is the general wrap up of this fragrance. Very grown, but also very complex to an extent that you may want to test this one before you actually pull full size of it, because it can come across as tricky, especially if you haven't used a lot of fragrances. Drawing its inspiration from Montauk's Honey A Oud is going to be this one, guys, Shaghaf Oud Asrach from the house of Swiss Arabian, and it's the last one on the line. So that's it, guys. I thought to just give you those recommendations for those that want gourmand style fragrances that do not have that element that you get in fragrances like Eclair, where you're going to be dripping of that Eclair. Fragrances like Vos Patisserie, where you're going to be dripping in yummy sweet syrupiness all day, or even fragrances like that Empire Victor, where you're going to be smelling of vanilla and creaminess and all that. These ones will have elements like that, but they're not going to make it the star of the show. However, they do fall under those gourmand style of fragrances. CeeChronicles is my name. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let's meet in the comment section where you're gonna drop for me some recommendations there that you feel are of fragrances that have a gourmand quality in them, but the gourmandness is mature and is that which is safe for both genders. Remember to turn on post notifications, guys. That way you get to be notified anytime I upload a video. Like and share this one, and remember that smelling good is a form of good manners. Cheers.